and welcome to another episode of Always Up to Date. I'm Denise and this is Yahweh, and we are co-owners of Always Bookkeeping. Today we're going to be talking about managing your sales tax. Our quote for the day is Zig Ziglar, and he said, when you stop planning and preparing, you stop winning. The statistic that we have is from Fraser Institute. The average Canadian pays 43% of income in taxes, which is tax, CPP, EI, GST, fuel tax, etc. And by comparison, on average, only 37% of the remaining income goes towards basic necessities like shelter, food, and clothing. We have a business owner who had to self-file quarterly GST returns, and after the year end was completed by the accountant, the GST returns did not match the filings at the end of the year. So Yahweh, I just have a few questions that people might want to ask to make sure that their GST is being filed properly. So as a small business owner, when do I have to file GST?
It really depends on what entity you have. So, for example, if you have a proprietorship for people in Alberta or in Canada, we have until June 15th to file our GSTs because we file our businesses with our personal taxes. So our proprietorship are due in June 15th. Now, if you have a corporation, then normally it's 3 months after your year end if you're filing annually. And if you are a quarterly remitter, then it'll be a month after the quarter that you have to file your GST. Yeah.
All right. So how often should I file my GST?
There's a few frequencies that you can choose. You can choose to file monthly or quarterly or annually. Basically, if you're under 1.5 million in revenue, you're not required to file quarterly. You have the option, or monthly, you have the option to file annually with your year end. But again, your year end your actual corporate tax might be a different deadline than the GST. For some reason, the Canadian government decided that your GST should be calculated even before you've completed your year end, which is I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. I don't know what's the reasoning behind it. They probably just want the GST to be remitted as quick as possible because, again, this is not something that you earn. This is something that you charge your customers and on behalf of the government. So that's probably why. But yeah, so it's you can file annually if your revenue is under 1.5 million. Yeah.
So is there an advantage on filing the GST annually?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, you don't have the administrative burden to do the GST filing as often, and also if you are doing your year end, chances are you're gonna have some transactions that you might have not seen, or you might have a double entry, or there's so many things that could happen that you won't discover until your accountant finished the end of the year. So you might as well do your annual GST filing with your year end to make sure that it actually matches your year end, and there's less room for mistakes in audit.
Yeah.
So
sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was going to just say, we talk about, some clients get scared that their GST is due 3 months, but their year end isn't due till 6 months. So, I'm going to have to pay interest and penalties on my GST if I don't file it till the year end. But really, the interest and penalties are not as high as if you have your year end and you have to make all these changes to your GST. Like it's such a small amount of interest that you would have to pay compared to getting it right on your year end.
Yeah.
And not having to go back and refile again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Making sure you have everything. So, Yahweh, what are the disadvantages of filing the GST quarterly or annually? Monthly. Quarterly or monthly.
I think I touched on it a little bit before on the other question. Yeah, so the main concern is the administrative burden that you have to do for filing it, especially if you have an external bookkeeper, an external accountant doing it for you. You're gonna have to pay that person to file it on a more regular basis than what you like or what you need. But the thing about filing quarterly, most of the business owners just think, oh, I want my refund to come in sooner because I want it, like, because I need it. If you're growing a business, your refund might just go might happen on just the first year of business. So why focus on that fact? Another thing is that especially if you're not a zero rated GST filer, again, if you are worried about interest and penalties on the GST, there is an option for you to do your installment without having to file if you're an annual filer. As long as you file, you've paid your GST on time, even if you file a little bit later, then you should eliminate the risk of having to have those interests and penalties on your GST. Yeah.
So can my accounting software help me with GST filing?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the accounting softwares now have sales tax built into their softwares. But you gotta be careful because there are some entries where the software is not able to handle the complexity of the transaction, so you might not be able to, for example, if you're using a general journal entry and you put a GST on there, sometimes the sales tax filing that is in your software doesn't necessarily understand what to do with the GST that you put in there unless you tell it to or you assigned it. So there is some extra steps that you have to take, but definitely some of them, here we have in Alberta we have GST, so it's pretty simple just to have the 5% on most of the transactions, and it's easy to set up that on QuickBooks or Sage. But yeah, you just have to make sure that you're very aware of the features and the weaknesses of the features on that software.
So you talked a little bit about installments. So is it okay to make installments without filing first?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, if you're worried about having to pay interest on your GST, definitely you can make monthly installments or even quarterly installments based on what you have on your books, and then adjust accordingly when you have your year end. The thing about that is that you would have paid the same amount of money that if you filed quarterly, but now when you do the annual and you did one filing, the annual return would be more accurate, and the CRA would be able to give you your refund quicker because now it matches your T2.
That's right. Plus, if you don't get a refund, you're not paying interest because you've already made payments. So, absolutely. Or even if you don't have enough, if you haven't made enough installments, at least the interest won't be, like, it'll be even less. Right. So, so how can an updated financial statement help me with my GST filings?
Again, if your books are updated and they're done accurately, you should know how much you're gonna owe for GST. So even if you file later, you already have an idea of what your GST would be if you have an updated book. So it's one of those things. Now your only main concern is the adjustments that your accountant will do, right? So again, it eliminates the administrative burden that you have to do managing your sales tax. Good.
So can my bookkeeper do the filing on my behalf?
Yeah, absolutely. There are many things that you can file or many ways that you can file your GST. First of them, you can, when you set up your GST, usually CRA sends you a form with the electronic filing. You can use that code to file. Another thing is if you have your own CRA account, you can file your return using that. If you have an external bookkeeper and they know your books pretty well, you can give them a consent. You can sign a consent form to them that gives them the authorization to file on your behalf. And normally a bookkeeper might have what we call the rep ID that enables them to represent you for tax purposes, and they should be able to file your GST using their client representative account.
Right. And so what happens to my proprietorship's GST account when I incorporate?
So if you were a proprietorship going to that's earning more to be able for you to incorporate, then you should be able to know that your GST for your proprietorship is still separate than your incorporated business. So you want to make sure that you close the GST, otherwise they will sometimes they will self-assess the GST that you will owe based on last year's filing. So you want to be careful with that, because most of the time if you're owing the previous years, chances are they're going to think you're going to be owing the next year, even though you're not operating as a proprietorship anymore. So you want to make sure that you file your last GST return and also request to close that GST return if you're not operating through your proprietorship anymore. That way you only have one GST account to manage, and that will be your GST account for your corporation. Yeah.
Right. And so what happens when the CRA self-assesses my GST return?
So again, if you didn't file your GST and you didn't close it, the CRA will just assume that you're still operating as a proprietorship. So they would try and self-assess your GST return. Now, most of the time, if it is amount owing, and they would put the balance that they think that you're gonna owe onto your account. So if the GST account isn't closed, most of the time they'll do this every year, and the more they do it, the more they think that your account is owing, and the amount owing would go higher and higher. This sometimes can lead into them holding your refunds personally for your personal tax account or your SIN number. So that's what you want to avoid. You don't want to get you don't want to deal with that at a later date. Most of them, they're easy fixes. You just have to file mail returns and they would do it. But again, as time goes by, the amount gets bigger, and CRA might take actions depending on the self-assessed GSTs that they did. So you want to make sure you file it, you close it, and then you just have one GST account on your corporate tax.
Right.
Yeah. Or a corporate account.
Yeah.
So I think that's all we have for today. I hope you find this informative. If you have any questions, or if you have any suggestions on what us Edmonton bookkeepers want to talk about, please feel free to comment down below, and please click like and subscribe if you like watching our videos, and we'll see you guys next time on our next episode for Always Up to Date.